What is the music you uniquely play, and who can hear your music? Welcome to the Hidden Work of Leadership. If you missed the first episode, please make sure to find it on your favorite podcast platform. I cannot wait for you to learn from our guest today, Lisa Pratt Slayton, who after this episode will be joining us for the rest of season 1 as a co-host. Lisa is the founder and CEO of Tamim Partners. Here, she partners with leaders and their teams to help them flourish and lead well in complex times. She is the leader that people want with them when they're in the trenches, and I am so grateful to call her a friend. In this episode, Lisa unpacks for us lessons she's learned the hard way, namely the cost of overextending ourselves to please others and defining ourselves to a system. Plus, she talks about how the Enneagram has been critical for her own journey of self-discovery and the leader that she's become today. Lisa, I am so glad you're here.
I know. This is so fun. It's like real. It's happening.
I know. It's real. It's happening. We have lots of ideas, and then when they're real and they're happening, it feels even better, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. We've moved into reality. The realization of dreams and hopes.
Ooh, there it is. Write that down in your journal, folks. The realization of dreams and hopes. Lisa, I'm really grateful to you for a lot of reasons, for being my friend, for being my co-author, for being my, when appropriate, sparring partner to get the best ideas and thoughts out in the world. But today, I'm grateful to you both for agreeing to be a co-host with me on this season of the Hidden Work of Leadership, and for helping us get to know you a bit more first by being like a guest-ish. We'll call you a guest-ish today.
Okay. I'll receive that moniker, the guest-ish.
The guest-ish.
That could be a podcast title. Anyway.
That could be. Here we are. I'm in branding. Somebody, side note, Lisa and I have a chapter in our book, Life in Flux, called Embrace the Unfigureoutable. And I had somebody text me, and this person said, "You seem to love making up words."
Yes. Well, let's keep doing that. I'm good with that. I love words, and I think we can always have more of them. So we'll add
guest-ish to that list today. Yeah, guest-ish, unfigureoutable. Okay. So let's start with a you question. Sure. And I'm going to ask this, and you can kind of go wherever you want. You can think formally, informally, relationally, structurally, whatever suits you, Lisa.
Yeah.
But I want to know, what do you uniquely bring to a leadership setting? In other words, what makes you you?
Yeah. Thanks. I've thought about these questions since you sent them last week, and I appreciate having time to reflect on them. I don't know if I ever shared this story with you. When I left Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation in 2019 to start my own consulting practice, I did something that was sort of hard but really worthwhile. I invited a group of very close friends to my house for lunch. And the purpose of the lunch was for them to answer 2 questions for me. What's the unique music I play? And who can hear my music? Right.
Oh, wow.
And these were people that I have worked with very closely over a long time, who I have navigated, significant, challenges in the work environment and in personal life together with. And what came out of that afternoon, which was really, it's very hard for me to focus the attention on me. I think you and I are similar that way. Mm-hmm. But I felt like I needed to do that to get clarity from outside of my own head as to how I wanted to lean into the work I believed God was calling me to do in this season. I had just turned 60. And so now I'm 5 years into this work. And the answers that came back were fascinating. But one of my close friends, who was on my board and then who ended up working for me at PLF working with me at PLF for a number of years, said, "You're the person I most want with me when I'm in the ditch." Mm. Mm. And he said, you know how to both with great care and compassion come alongside and support me, but also kick me in the butt.
Yeah,
right.
that's so true.
And I think I can say a lot more, but I think that's a big part of who I am and who I've become over all these years of working in the leadership space, particularly based coming out of my own experience. And that was not always the truth. That was not always true of me. I spent, as I talk about in the book, in 15 years ago when I took over PLF, I was in a space where I felt like I had to make everybody happy and, try and meet the needs of every single stakeholder all the time, and nearly killed myself in the process. And so the learning has come the hard way through pain. And I think that's very true. And so when I've talked to people who want to do this work with me, I'm really looking for deep readiness and, are they willing to lean in hard? Because this isn't pet the kitty, right? This is hard work and requires the ability to self-reflect and hear hard truths about yourself. And I've been willing to do that work myself in every season of my life over the last, since I've been an adult, in different ways. And I do think it looks different in every season because you're in different places in your life. So.
Okay, so many good things in there. I'm just going to mirror back a few of them before I ask you a question about a story. So I heard in there something that kind of like, I'm sitting here in my chair and I felt kind of the ping in my chest, not because it's relevant to me or anything like that, but this propensity to overextend for the sake of other people, right? Ooh, that's just, so let's like put a pin in there and maybe come back to that. I wonder if in your story, I also heard you reference, but not say clearly, just for our listeners who might not know, Lisa spends a lot of her time coaching folks, coaching leaders, and being in what we might call messy vocational spaces with people, when people are discerning, when they're like having to peel back the layers of who they are. So when she's talking about doing work with different people in different seasons, a lot of that shines through in the book that we wrote, Life in Flux, but just that. And then I felt like maybe we could stop and just be done recording when you said those two questions that you gathered folks around. Let me make sure I'm getting these right. What is the music I uniquely play?
Yeah.
And who can hear my music?
That's right.
Oh, Lisa. Okay. All right. Masterclass right there. Just pulling some things out. Okay. Now, and I know that the goal of this podcast is to pull back the curtain on some of the most important, but often hidden work we do as leaders, kind of that inner work, that stuff that not everybody sees. It's, the data would say, both the Dupree Center data, the anecdotal data, you and I have our own forms of data collection over the years. The folks who can really lean in when times are tough and not look away, those end up being the kind of leaders that other people want to work with and aren't toxic and all of these things. Okay. So this season is all about unpacking for listeners the hidden work that happens when life is in flux. That's obviously sort of connected to this project and this work that you and I have been about for a while, this book we wrote, Life in Flux. But what I'm hoping you'll do now is tell us about a time in which your life felt like it was in flux and how that's shaped your life, work, and leadership.
Yeah. Well, I referenced in answering the first question, the season where I took over the leadership of Pittsburgh Leadership Foundation, and it was in a crisis. We had it was 2012. If you remember that time period, we were coming out of the recession, financial crisis, and the lag of that financial crisis in the nonprofit world continued to wreak havoc. Right, donations were down. The crisis continued, and PLF was not immune to that. And we had been in the process of really shifting what we did and how we did it in the midst of all of that, which feels a little crazy now as I look back on it. And so we were in a financial crisis, and in the midst of that, the board came to me and said, we think we want to make a leadership change. We're not sure exactly what we need to do. Would you agree to step in as the interim president of PLF if we do this? And I thought about it and I prayed about it. And one of my longtime mentors said, oh, you don't want to do that. And of course I did it anyway, right? I think about his counsel to me many times and what the path would have been if I'd followed it. But that's, that's water under the bridge. And so I said yes. And the first thing I'll say to our listeners is if you can avoid ever being an interim, avoid it. Unless the parameters around it are clearly defined, it's a very difficult spot to be in because you're the leader of the organization. But if you have the word interim attached, it feels like you're in a holding pattern, right? And so it's hard to do some things. That said, I went on a listening tour for the organization. I called every leader I knew that would give me 30 minutes, and I asked them 3 questions. I'm in a crisis and in a turnaround situation. What advice would you give me? How have you led through these kinds of situations? And what's the one thing I should never do? Were basically the 3 questions. And I talked to probably 40 or 50 leaders over the course of several months. They were very gracious. Many of them gave me far more time than 30 minutes. And it served a number of purposes. One, I learned a ton. 2, it helped me to rebuild a lot of relationships, which I found needed rebuilding as part of what I was being called to do in this season. And I got great advice. For those of you who lead nonprofits, one of the best pieces of advice came from another very, very capable nonprofit CEO who said, never surprise your board. Just tuck that one away for good.
That one away.
And you can't communicate enough, particularly when you're in a difficult season. And so I stayed in that role as an interim for several months and finally hit a crisis point about 6 months in. And I just called time out with my board, and my staff knew because we were in it together that we weren't in a place of viability in the current environment. And it caused my board to go into a crisis because they had not, they supported me because they cared about me, but they weren't doing their job as a board in quite the way they were supposed to. And it required them to step back and do some self-examination. And it was in that season, and I tell the story in the book, where, a good close friend came to me and said, Lisa, you're allowing the system to define you, and that was a huge moment for me. I think, we'll talk about the Enneagram perhaps a little bit. I'm an Enneagram 8, for those of you who don't know me. And so, I got a lot of power. I got a lot of energy. I get stuff done. And my posture towards the system, which was a big group of stakeholders, including my board and my staff and the people we served, was to try and make everybody happy and to try and serve everyone's needs. And that's just not humanly possible, right? Yeah. And so I had to step back. I'm a rescuer. There's family history there. I won't go into that now, but I'm the oldest adult child in an alcoholic family. I had to be an adult at a very young age in my household for all the reasons that happen when you're in that kind of an environment. And I can, power up and lean into any situation and be the adult in the room, except that I couldn't do it anymore. I was physically exhausted. I was emotionally exhausted, and I was spiritually, just sagging, right, is the best way I can think about it. I just was sagging. And that was the beginning of a season of very hard work for me.
First of all, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's, quite the story for, on a lot of levels. I'm curious about 3 or 4 things in there. So I'll ask kind of pieces one at a time. I'm curious what you know about, or what you think might be true about why you didn't listen to that first mentor who was like, don't do this role.
Yeah. I think it was part of my own dysfunction, right? As an 8, you put it, you can't do it or you shouldn't do it in front of me. And that's that's a challenge, right? And I'm all about taking the hill and taking up the challenge. And so I think there was a little of that. I would call it immature stubbornness in me that said, I can
Okay.
do this, right? I can take it on. I also think the bigger reason is I cared so deeply about the mission of this
Yes.
organization.
Yes.
And I was so invested in the work that we were doing and where I believed we needed to go. And I just couldn't let it go. I couldn't,
Yeah.
if I had walked away, I mean, there's a bit of arrogance and pride in there, right? That says if I walked away, it would have died. I don't know if that's true. It could have, who knows what would have happened if I had said no, but I said no, I said yes. And so because I cared and I wanted to continue doing the work that I believed God had purposed us to do in that season as an organization.
Yeah. Our mutual friend, Denise Daniels, it was right before I was about to have my second child. And I was working at Fuller at the time and feeling a little stressed about taking maternity leave. And she said to me, she is a mother of four, in addition to being a really accomplished and amazing academic and professional and like somebody we all want to be like. She said that the most important lesson she learned on, I don't know, whatever maternity leave it was for her, was that in fact she was replaceable.
Yeah.
And that, that has stuck with me, and it feels resonant to what you're saying. That there is this really human place that we can find ourselves in at the intersection of I care a lot and I'm willing to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
care a lot and I'm willing to do it. And that's what I hear in your story. I also, for listeners who are like, what does Lisa mean by the Enneagram? We'll get there a little bit. We're going to go there in a little bit, but I would, there's like language around this, and Lisa's talking about herself as a type 8, which is a very powerful presence, a very powerful personality, powerful protector, wants to challenge what's wrong. And so you can see just how your natural wiring would say, I'm going to take this on. The next place I want to go in your story is something that I wonder if this would hit listeners just in the way that it's hit me nearly every time you've told the story, which is that board chair comment of, Lisa, you're allowing yourself to be defined by the system. Can you unpack what that means and help us understand that a bit more?
Yeah, just to be clear, it wasn't my board chair who said that.
Okay, sorry.
It was another. That's all right. It was someone else who was close to me and close to the system. And I didn't know. I'm like, okay, like you, I'm like, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
But boy, something about it just struck me, and I wanted to find out. And so this particular person, who's both an accomplished social worker, studied family systems, and is also an Anglican priest, came alongside me and said, let's do some work around this. Mm-hmm. And it comes out of family systems theory that says essentially, which we could do a whole podcast on, or 5, but it says, we're all parts of systems, right? Relational systems, emotional systems, organizational systems. And the work of the healthy person is to remain attached to the system in a healthy way. When we're not healthy, we tend to go to the extremes. We go to being deeply enmeshed or embedded in all the drama of the system, or we detach, we cut and run, right? Get me out of here. I can't, the heat's too much. And the work is to be clear enough internally on who you are, to define yourself. Edwin Friedman, who has written much about this in the leadership space, calls it a well-differentiated person. You're a well-defined person, so that you can stay attached to the system in a healthy way, but not allow it to constantly be pulling you in one direction or another based on the needs or the whims of one part of the system. And I think that's what had exhausted me. It was a complex system, and lots of emotional and relational pieces to it. And there were very different groups of stakeholders who wanted and saw very different things. And I was trying to make them all happy. Mm-hmm. And that's, for me, I think that was the moment that said, okay, I just can't do this anymore. I have to do the work.
Yeah. So, we have the benefit of being able to both ask you about your story, and then also, you named that you work with lots of people. So I'm going to ask you this question kind of with both of those hats on. So if someone's listening right now and they're saying, I don't actually know where I fit in that spectrum. You described, on the one end, the cut and run, totally detached. On the other end, enmeshed, my identity is made by this system. And then there's this other space of healthy attachment. What are some questions that could help me locate myself in that if I'm unsure?
Yeah. I want to go, back one step further and just, comment that when people come to me, it's often, not always, but it's often in a moment of disruption or crisis. And it usually has to do with their work life. Sometimes it's bigger than work life, but it's often with their work life. And you and I spent a lot of time, and you had done this work for your previous book, defining what we mean by vocation and calling. And it's a big word, right? It encompasses more than just our occupation or our career. And they come to me in crisis, and the first thing they say is, I don't know what to do, right? And my response is, I don't either. And I'm not as worried about that. I want to know who you are, right? And so I think that's where it begins, is doing the deeper work of knowing who you are and who you're not.
Yeah.
Right. And, we wrote about this, but the temptation of competent people is to become overextended very quickly, because we can build competencies and skills that we get very good at. People rely on us for them. And if we sit down and look at our calendar on a weekly basis and see things that are related to those competencies, our heart sinks, right? Like, oh, I got to spend an hour on that thing. We're good at it, right? People expect us to do it. Yeah. And so part of it is doing that deeper work. I have never in all my years of doing this and watching broadly across the landscape of, leadership failures, seen a leader who failed because they were well defined, right? As much as if they, it had as much more to do with them getting way out over their skis and believing things about themselves that they're hearing potentially from others that just simply aren't true, and then not being able to live into that because it's just not humanly possible. So I think that's where the work is who am I and who am I not? And then from there, and I have lots of tools that I use to help people do that. And, we wrote about some of them, and there's many, many out there, but we have to find ways to gain insight, to open up the windows and the doors on who we are and how we move in the world. And that takes time. It's a lengthy, messy, painful process.
Yeah. I heard you. So now I'm thinking about Life in Flux, and I'm thinking about a variety of, so Life in Flux, for listeners, this is a book that's meant to really offer guidance and tools and frameworks to do this deeper work when things feel like they're disrupted, when things feel surprising, when all of a sudden you find yourself on the precipice of pain or possibility, just all this stuff. So, but Lisa, I heard you. I'm going to name like 4 things I heard, and then you're going to get to choose where you want to go. So we'll choose your own adventure here. I heard letting go in there. I heard staying in your headlights. I heard coming home to yourself. Those are all navigational skills that we talk about. I'm thinking particularly about your story and this process of, not letting the system define you. Which of those navigational skills, or which couple felt foremost for you, and can you unpack how they played out?
Yeah, I mean, of the 3 you named, I feel like I was the living example of every navigational skill in our book when I went through the season, which is
not that I've ever been there.
And why we wrote the book, because we know it's valuable. I think I want to pause for a moment on letting go. It's when we start to believe these things about ourselves, we hang on to them very tightly. I believe I'm omnicompetent, right? I believe I'm able to, solve all the problems and no one else. It was such a dysfunctional belief for me. And I really had to, what I realized, was I found a book that was helpful to me in that season. I'm a bookaholic, among other things, as Michaela knows. And the book was called The Responsibility Virus. And it basically, unpacks why those of us who feel overly responsible for all things are actually doing harm to ourselves. But we're doing harm to the people around us. Right?
Sure.
When we take too much responsibility, we're undermining the empowerment of those people who are on the team, who are working with us.
Yes.
And so letting go of that sense of responsibility, which is, I don't know that I'll ever completely let go of it, but I'm clearer now on what I say yes to and what I say no to. So that was the first one. And that was really hard. Right. The ironic part of all of this is that during, I'm doing this work and I'm also leading cohorts of leaders through some of this work. Right. So I've been doing this work with cohorts of leaders at that point for 5 or 6 years. As I'm learning, I'm like, oh, we have to take these leaders to a deeper place, right? Because every place I'm learning for myself, I want to share with others. But it was so obvious that, I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and this is an entrepreneurial, a hang up. Entrepreneurs, because it's true in the beginning, often when you're starting something, you have to wear all the hats.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you start to grow, and now you don't have to wear all the hats, but it's hard to know which ones to let go of. And by the way, you only trust yourself, right? And so, who's going to do this and who's going to do that the way that I would do it. And the good news is there are lots of people who can do those things, and they don't do them exactly the way you do them, but maybe they do them better. Right, and maybe they love doing those things when you don't. Yeah. So that piece was really, really important to me. And then it was, okay, now how do I go deeper into the who am I? How am I uniquely wired and made? And what are the things that I want to put my hand to? Because, a trap for me is, for a lot of reasons, not the least of which are all the things I've just described, I get stuff done. Yeah. Right. And people rely on me to get stuff done. And more times than I can count, I have been asked to step into highly administrative roles. Right.
Interesting.
Because I get stuff done. Oh, give it to Lisa, she'll get it done, is a common refrain. And, I took pride in that for a while. Yeah. Now it's the kiss of death for me. Right. And I don't say yes to a lot of administrative roles anymore. I am uniquely motivated. I work with something around intrinsic motivation, which we mentioned in the book. And I'm uniquely motivated to shape things, and guide experiences, both with tangible things. I love to cook a good meal for people, but I also love to shape transformational experiences for people that help them to grow and change over time, and put me in the administrative role. And I have no energy for the thing that I'm actually uniquely wired to do. Right. Yeah. And so learning that and saying no to certain things and finding other people who are gifted in those areas to complement me and to partner with me has been, it was a really big part of the coming home to myself piece, and helped me then stay in my headlights. Right. Yeah. If you know what to say no to, right. Or, hey, life is life. Sometimes you can't say no, but you can say, hey, I can do this for a short period of time, and then let's figure out who the right person is over time to take on this role, because I'm not the person who can do it and sustain it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think the other thing we're seeing here is that this is not one-time work. So, right now, very live in my own world is the letting go, and letting go of some of the specific things that, like, I have a small team at a pre-center, which when you have a small team, it means that sometimes things come that fall in between people, or there's some overlap. And it's my inclination to be like, I should do that, because if somebody else has to do it, it's a burden to them. Right. So it's not just that it's not actually that they won't do it well, but it's, that work is not, that work's kind of going to be taxing or a burden. So I better do that so that somebody else doesn't have to. And then there's this like sense of, well, my motives are very altruistic, but that ends up getting us all in trouble. Right. So there's just this, and I just want to name that, because I think that, Lisa, there's probably still stuff that you're letting go of. And for our listeners, yes, the let go and then the come home to yourself and the ability then to stay in your headlights. And then, oh my goodness, you find yourself back at the let go again because you're doing the same thing or something else came up. Okay. As evidence, Lisa, you are a very self-reflective person. I love this about you. I love you and I feel like we could just talk for a while and do our own like self-analysis and analysis of each other. And I think that's an area where we really jive back and forth. Well, and you have all these tools that you've named. Many of them are good. But one that you gravitate toward a lot that you've even mentioned so far today and has been a constant in our friendship and working relationship is the Enneagram.
Yeah.
I find this very helpful. You and I have said before, some people are like, I don't like anything personality driven or I don't like any of the tests or the frameworks. You and I are not those people. We like all of them. Forgive us all of them and help us like learn more things. But you led for us a companion piece to Life in Flux that really did a deeper dive with navigating change based on the Enneagram. So can you just unpack how the Enneagram could potentially be helpful when life feels like it's in flux? Like, why did we use this tool? Help us understand a bit.
Yeah, I am a self-described assessment junkie. Even like the 10 questions on BuzzFeed, like 100%, I'll do them all.
Yeah. And which Harry Potter are you?
Yeah,
all of them.
No, I'm all about which Lord of the Rings am I.
Oh, okay. Anyway, wait, which Lord of the Rings are you?
I am someone who I can never remember his name. I'll have to think of it.
We'll circle back. That'll go in the show notes. Back. Lisa's Lord of the Ring.
We'll figure Lisa's Lord of the Ring.
BuzzFeed test. Yes.
I so want to be Gandalf, but I'm not.
Oh, there it is. There it is. That is the letting go. That is the coming home to yourself. That is the stay in your headlights.
Gandalfs. We have a mutual friend, Steve Garber. Steve Garber is Gandalf, right?
Yes.
I am not, and I rely on the wisdom of Steve Garber a lot. So the Enneagram, it's really fascinating. I was first introduced to it. Someone gave me a set of cassette tapes in like 2005. That shows you how old I am and how long ago it was, of Richard Rohr, who is arguably in this decade, in this century, or the last century, the most studied Enneagram teacher. And he was teaching through the numbers. And I remember listening to them and thinking, I identified with a couple. And then there is a what I would call a starter assessment for the Enneagram, which is often where I begin with people who are new to it, that we reference in the guide, that returns back to you your top. It actually returns all 9 personality types in rank order, but it gives you your top 3 with some more in-depth descriptions. And because the assessment isn't perfect, and so it wants to help you think through, okay, which one of these types resonates the most with you. What I like about the Enneagram is that it's not just all focused on the goodness of you. It's also focused on the wounds and the shadows and the vices of you and the things that drive you underneath.
Light stuff, Lisa. Light stuff.
Enneagram wisdom is all, behaviorally, a lot of personality things are both based on behaviors, right? And I think those are helpful, and I use them in a variety of settings. But the Enneagram is really about deeply looking at what motivates you. What was the wound in your life as a child, particularly, and then how did that shape you? And I would say that, Enneagram teachers are often asked, is it nature or nurture, right? Am I born this way, or was I shaped this way by my environment? And the answer is yes, right? It's both of those things. Right. We have predispositions, and our environment shapes us over time. Both of those things are true. And what I like about the Enneagram is it's a forcing function in some ways for people to examine that darker shadow, the vice. There's a continuum of vice to virtue in the Enneagram, and it forces you to really examine the vice and understand what unhealthy looks like, And good Enneagram teachers talk about health to unhealth in, from 0 to 9, right? Or 0 to 10. Where are you from a health perspective, and what it looks like when you're healthy and what you're doing to grow. And I'm all about growth and development for people.
Yeah.
And this is a journey. Yeah. And I think the Enneagram, underneath each of the 9 types are 3 subtypes. I mean, there are layers and layers and layers that you can peel back. It's not just a great tool to use for a workshop and then kind of tuck it away as a good information. It continues to inform and create wisdom and really help people to unpack who they are, and how they're moving in the world and what's getting in their way, what keeps us stuck, and what are we doing that's causing pain for ourselves or pain for others. And how do we continue on the journey of growth? And so I came back to the Enneagram in the season I was talking to you about. I sort of put it away. I don't know that I was ready for it, or it wasn't ready for me. I don't know, in that 2006-07 season, but I came back to it a few years later and I was like, oh, this is going to help me in this season of self-definition. And so I started to really, really dig in. And of course, that was just as, I would say it was before, but just as the Enneagram was sort of gaining new traction in the world of, self-development and self-discovery and all of that. And now it's kind of everywhere. And there's some great teachers out there and great resources, which we name in our guide.
Yeah, thank you. Just for those who are wondering, it's also a really wonderful framework for understanding how you can work together. So Lisa is the type that we call the powerful protector. And I am the type that we call the optimistic adventurer. Lisa's an 8, I'm a 7. Lisa's laughing. She has done enough life with me to know that the optimistic adventurer fits well. Though everybody, even as recently as last week, most people think I'm a 3, the driven performer,
right.
Which probably connects somewhat to what we were talking about earlier, which is, sure, I'm happy to do the things because I want to serve the people, but all of a sudden I'm doing all the things. And then I look like a driven performer when really I'm just trying to have fun. Right. So there's just layers of this. I just love this. And we've been getting some really good feedback about this. So navigating change with the Enneagram, we'll put that in the show notes. Lisa, last question. First of all, this is fun. You're awesome. I love doing this with you.
This is fun. I can't wait to do the rest of them with other people. It's going to be super fun.
It's going to be great. This is a question that I think we're going to end every episode with, and we'll see how it goes. You'll be the beta. If we belly flop, then this will be the one and only question that we get. And if it feels good and right, you probably, listeners, hear this question at the end of each episode. So lastly, Lisa, what's one thing you'd say to your younger self about doing this often hidden inner work of leadership?
I thought about this again because you had sent the questions in advance. I think the one thing I would say to my younger self is slow down. Check your speed. We wrote that chapter in the book, and I think for both of us, it was a speed check, right? In many ways. Michaela and I, the way we talk about the Enneagram in the book, we touch it through the lens of what's called the orientation to time. And there are 3 types that are oriented towards the future. And Michaela and I represent 2 of those 3 types. And the Enneagram 3 is the other one. So it's not surprising that people could confuse you. And I'm always pushing hard into the future. And I've learned the hard way that slowing down and being present to the present is where the work is. It's where the work is for all of us, actually, every type. I had a conversation with my brother-in-law who is he's dating a woman that he's been seeing for about a year and a half. And I was describing the Enneagram to them through this lens. They had no idea what the Enneagram is. And his girlfriend immediately said, "Oh, I'm a future type." And he said, "Yeah, I'm a present type." And I looked at him, and I know him. Obviously, I've been married to Roger for 43 years, so I've known his brother for that long. And I said, "Yeah, but being a present type doesn't mean that you're present." Right? And so even present-oriented types have to learn to be present. Present-oriented types focus on what's right in front of them, but they can be on the monkey wheel, right? And so what does it mean to stop and pause and pay attention, to be present to yourself and to others in the moments that you're in? Doesn't stop me from looking out to the future and doing the things that I do that move myself and my family or my work, the people I'm working with into the future. But how do I show up and be present in the moment? And that's ongoing work. I mean, I think I've gotten better at that. And I know I think particularly in my 30s, would have benefited from having that lesson more solidly embedded in my psyche. Because I go fast, Michaela. I move fast. I get stuff done. That's what, and I get rewarded for it, right? So I get rewarded. The thing that I consider now to be almost dysfunctional is the thing that the world rewards me for, which is getting stuff done, right? And accomplishing things and getting results and moving projects down the road and all of that stuff. And those aren't bad things in and of themselves, but boy, they need guardrails on them. And I think slowing down and paying attention, and that means sometimes you say no to things, and that means, you can't be all things to all people. And I think, I remember, as we were writing the book, I think it was you that came to me and said, as I'm reading through this, we had the Check Your Speed chapter later in the book initially. And it was like, oh, no, we need to move this up, right? Because for everyone, slowing down is where the work often is, certainly in the culture that we live in. It's not true in other cultures. Other cultures are much more paced, but the Western culture is very, very driven and very, very fast paced.
Yeah. One practical example of this pace and orientation to time, and then we'll sign off. And I learned this from you, Lisa. I have 3 of my best friends from grad school. We talk a lot, we do the things. One of us just got a health diagnosis that is not a fun health diagnosis. And 2 of us are future oriented. So we started with all the you got to be feeling this. You got to be we're ready to, And that friend who got the health diagnosis is a present type. So what ends up happening is the day before it's a big day, that's when we hear from her. The feelings are coming now. And then our 4th friend is a past time orientation. So she's really good at the processing what already has happened. So now what my other future oriented friend and I have learned to do is set alarms on our phone for the day before. The day before the big days, then we are we're here. And so there's these, sometimes it's a mechanism that has to bring you back to the present and be able to align with others. But I feel like I'm able to do that, set an alarm for the day before the big day, because I understand her orientation to time, which you taught me. And so I'm grateful to you for that. Lisa, this has been so wonderful. I can't wait to have you join me as a co-host on the rest of the season.
So will that make me a hostish?
Hostish. We'll decide.
Okay.
This is going to be our cliffhanger.
Guestish to a hostish.
Listeners, you tune in next time to see what official title we've given Lisa. Guestish to hostish, co-host, or something else entirely.
Something else in between. Wonderful. Thank you, Michaela.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for tuning in to the Hidden Work of Leadership. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it insightful. The Hidden Work of Leadership is brought to you by the Max Dupree Center for Leadership at Fuller Seminary, where we envision a world in which leaders across industries and seasons of life are deeply formed as the people of God so that they might seek the very best for the people and systems entrusted to their care. Our episodes are produced by Justin Heap, who ensures our engineering and editing is engaging and sounds just right. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing us on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more listeners like you. You can also follow the Dupree Center on LinkedIn and Instagram for updates and behind-the-scenes content. For more information about today's episode and access to additional resources, visit our website at dupree.org. That's DEPREE.org. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Hidden Work of Leadership.